Hi ladies, so somebody asked me to do a little revision on the carbon and the nitrogen cycle, so I'm going to try and do that for you now, okay? So we'll start with the easy one, the carbon cycle, because carbon cycle is something that's done at junior and it's something that's not too hard to get your head around. Now first of all, why is it important? Now the carbon cycle is really important because it involves the increases and decreases of CO2 in the air, which obviously impacts global warming. Okay, so that's why it's important, all right? So it increases and decreases, it involves the increases and decreases of CO2 in the air, impacts global warming. So let's look at this. So CO2 in the air, right? So think about ways that it gets into the air. So let's think about the first way that it gets into the air, okay? So burning of fossil fuels. That's one way it gets into the air, okay? Another way it gets into the air. Respiration of living things. So me, you, plants, okay, respiration of living things, all right? How does it get out of the air then, okay? So it gets out of the air by plants through the process of photosynthesis, okay? Also gets out of the air by, let me see, try and make it a bit more space. Also gets out of the air by being absorbed into the seas, causing a slight acidification of the seas, which obviously can impact then living creatures within the sea, okay? So it comes out by photosynthesis into the seas, goes in to the air by respiration of living things, including plants. So plants is a two-way thing because they also do respiration. Burning of fossil fuels. Other things that cause carbon dioxide increase in the air is will be decay. Okay, so death and decay of organisms. So that occurs through bacteria, viruses, fungi, really bacteria and fungi that cause the breakdown of organic matter, which also releases carbon dioxide. So there are the different ways that it goes into and out of the atmosphere, okay? Obviously, the more carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, the greater that greenhouse effect that it causes, the more global warming, and then you've obviously got the impacts of global warming on top of that, which is rising sea levels, climate change across the earth. So you get, desertification around certain parts of the world where there's no rain. You get issues like more serious storms than normal. All of those type of things. Okay, so they are all the impacts of global warming and climate change. All right. So that's the carbon cycle. It's fairly simple. Okay, nitrogen cycle, a little bit more difficult and a little bit comes up more regularly in biology because it's not a junior cert level. So why is it important? Okay, so N2 in the air cannot be used by plants or animals for their DNA or proteins. So DNA and proteins both contain nitrogen, so plants and animals have to have a way of getting that nitrogen from the air somehow and getting into their cells, okay? So let's think about different ways that nitrogen enters the air and leaves the air, okay? Now let's first of all think about the different types of nitrogen compounds that plants can use, okay? So nitrates and nitrites are the ones that plants can use. So first things first, okay, so nitrogen fixing bacteria. Roots of legumes. So legumes are those plants that vegetarians have to eat a lot of for their protein, okay? So roots of legumes such as beans and peas, they have nitrogen fixing bacteria. They take nitrogen from the air and they make nitrates and nitrites. Okay, so that's what they make, okay? Then those nitrates and nitrites can be taken up by plants, okay, and they put it into their proteins, into their DNA, and then obviously they can be taken up by animals. That's called assimilation. Okay, so we've got animals there. Assimilation, I'll try and spell that. Okay, so they're obviously eating those animals. So think about a cow eating grass. They take the nitrogen compounds from the plants, so your DNA and your proteins, they put it into their own proteins, and then obviously we can come along and eat the cows and get protein from them, or if we're vegetarian, get protein directly from the plants as well. Okay, so let's think about other ways nitrogen gets circulates around the atmosphere as well. Okay, so we've also got animals do their wee-wees or do their urination. Okay, and they release urea and ammonia into the soil. Okay, so urea, so we've got animals, we've got plants, we've got urea and ammonia. Now, urea and ammonia, not that useful to a plant unless we have a special type of bacteria present called a nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria. Okay, and those nitrifying bacteria are able to take urea and ammonia and convert it back to your well, actually, you put the arrow that way, convert it back to your nitrates and nitrites, which then can then be taken up by plants again. All right, so let's think about this again. So we've got nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil, in the roots of legumes. Okay, make nitrates and nitrites, taken up by plants, which can then be taken up by animals. Okay, then animals will then urinate and they release urea and ammonia onto the soil. Then we've got nitrifying bacteria that will then reconvert those urea and the ammonia back into nitrates and nitrites, which again can go back into plants. We also have the natural process, girls, of lightning. Okay, so what we can do here is we can do a little arrow all the way around here. Okay, lightning. So lightning is another natural method of nitrogen fixation that occurs in the air. Okay, due to the huge amount of energy and electricity and the huge amount of nitrogen in our atmosphere. Okay, so lightning can also create nitrates and nitrites. Okay, now think about a bad form of bacteria now that can actually do the opposite of your nitrogen fixing. So what we can get here is we can get a bad form of bacteria coming along, and what it will do is it will convert the nitrates and nitrites back to N2. Okay, that they are called denitrifying bacteria. Okay, and they are found in swampy soils, and they're they're obviously a bad thing because they're making the soil less fertile, less useful to plants, and therefore that's why swampy soils have very little grown in them, because of these bacteria converting the good nitrates and nitrites back into nitrogen in the air. They're most of the parts of the nitrogen cycle, girls. It would certainly be enough to answer a question. Now, I know this diagram, it's not the prettiest diagram in the world. I do have it kind of squished in beside the carbon cycle. I'm sure there's ways you can find it prettier, and I'll try and see if I can find a prettier one online. But it's just going through the main parts of it. So I'm hoping that was useful, girls. Thanks.